Hi, my name is Moriah Evans, and I was the case study leader of our group, and my other teammates were Lauren, Kari, and Chez. My school is called Farrell B. Hal, and it's located in the Montbello area of Denver. It's off of Peoria and I-70. And at my school, it's an ECE through 8th grade. We have ELA-E classrooms where the students are taught in English the whole day, and then we have ELA-S classrooms where the students are taught in Spanish all day except for ELD time and arts time. There are 4 different languages spoken at our school. However, the language that is the majority of our students speak is Spanish. I see around 140 kids every day, and all of their native languages is Spanish, except for one of my students, his native language is Vietnamese. As you can see with our percentages, our majority of our students are Hispanic. We have a smaller percentage African Americans, and then our smallest percentage being white students. It is located in a low socioeconomic status area, so 91% of our students receive free or discounted lunch. In our ELD program, we serve about 425 of our students. We have 720 ELLs. However, some of those kids have either exited the program or their parents did not want them in the ELD program. At the end of the year, we have to do scheduling again for the next year, and our school is centered around our ELD program. Every grade level has a certain time for ELD, and during those times, we ELD teachers push into the classroom with a cart, and we place the students either into the beginning, intermediate, or advanced class, and then we teach them for around 45 minutes. After that, the homeroom teacher comes back to the classroom, and then they teach. So during the ELD time, our teachers have either meetings or planning time. So it's a great time for them to be able to have either an extra planning time during the day or to have a meeting time and they still receive their 2 other planning times. Like I said, the ELD teachers push in on carts into the homeroom teachers' classrooms, and because of this, we have to make sure that we're really organized so that the lesson can go as smoothly as possible. For me, I put all the different grade levels into a different bin, and then I can just grab that bin, and then my pencils are on top, and it makes it really easy. So in kindergarten through 5th, there are 3 of us that teach ELD, and then for 3rd grade through 8th, there are 2 ELD teachers. Here are our Access test scores, and as you can see, we have more percentages in developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching, which is great because we're trying to get our students exited out of ELD, so we're progressing that way. We are 5th out of 12 in our testing domain, and they say that our Access scores are satisfactory. This is our case study student, and she is in kindergarten. She's been at our school for 2 years and in the district for 2.5 years. In her classroom, she's in an ELA-S classroom, which means she's taught in Spanish for all of her content areas. And then I come in and teach her English at the end of the day. And during arts time, she is also taught in English. She speaks Spanish and English. During the day, she likes speaking English with her peers in an arts class, and she speaks Spanish in her homeroom. And then at home, her family speaks Spanish to her. Here are her WAPT scores, and she was scored in August of this beginning of this school year. Her speaking and listening are pretty good, and then her reading and writing she didn't score at all on, and this makes sense because in ECE they don't have ELD classes. They start ELD classes in kindergarten. Her proficiency level overall is mid. My student is at the beginning level of speaking in English. You can look at the different things that relate to what she can do. And when I ask her a question or when she's responding to something, she usually speaks in more than one word at a time. She almost always can reply to what I'm asking. My student uses words that I teach from the unit we are doing and some other general vocabulary. She also knows enough English to talk socially in English, but it's a lot harder for her to use academic language and communicate that way. In her writing, she wrote a simple sentence, as you can tell from the picture above, but I gave her a developing in writing because I've seen her write sentences that are more complex with using conjunctions such as because or so. And in this sentence that she wrote, though, she used specific language from the unit, which was bricks and strong. But on the other hand, sometimes she tries to write more complex sentences and it's harder for me to understand what she's trying to say. However, I believe she's at the developing stage of writing because she's starting to write complex sentences. She is taught in Spanish for reading, so reading is hard for her in English. However, in Spanish, she's a really strong reader and she loves reading in Spanish. She's good at decoding words and she's at higher level books than other students in her class. In English, she's able to sound out some of the words based on her knowledge in Spanish, but that's about all she can do right now. Her listening skills are great. She is able to follow directions. She's able to do the different activities that I'm asking them to do, and she's a helper. If someone is really confused, she tries to go over and help them because she knows what's going on. The only problem is she doesn't like sitting for long periods of a time, and so she gets a little sidetracked with some of the directions sometimes. I interviewed her homeroom teacher, and she said that reading comes really easy for our student. She has a ton of friends, and even when they go into arts classes, which is where they will integrate kids who are taught in the ELA E classrooms and kids who are taught in the ELA S classrooms and mix them up, she's made friends with the students in the ELA E classrooms. And she makes sure that others are happy, just like I was telling earlier how she likes to help people. And her mother is really invested in her education. The homeroom teacher and the mother of our student have a really close relationship and talk all the time. Another thing that really helps our student is sharing with others. So she will share with others before she goes and writes and will be able to write easier. And also this helps for reading when they're sharing about questions or different things like that. Then I interviewed the art teacher at our school, and she said that she is always focused on the activities that they're doing at hand. She likes working with partners and in groups and works really well with them. And she uses English when she's in those arts classes. She doesn't use Spanish like when she's in her homeroom and she uses Spanish, which I think is great. She uses some academic language and mostly social language with them. And the art teacher said that she is just a really kind and warm student and she loves having her in her classroom. Then I interviewed her parents, and her parents only speak in Spanish, and so I interviewed them in Spanish because I'm able to communicate with them in Spanish. And she's lived in the U.S. her entire life. Her parents said that she remembers things really easily. She likes to be around others. She doesn't really like playing by herself. And another thing is her parents really want her to grow up to be a good person and have a good job. They don't really care what type of job, that just she makes a good living from it. Then I asked my student questions, and she told me she prefers to speak in English. She loves reading, especially in Spanish. She really likes computer class because they get to go up and play games on the computer. And when she wants to grow up, she wants to be a dentist. She said that she likes having clean teeth and that she likes being able to give out stickers to people if they're doing a good job at brushing their teeth.
In regards to proficiency level across the domains of language, our student is overall at the beginner level. Our case study student was tested on linguistic complexity, vocabulary usage, and language control. Our student tested consistently in all of those areas I just mentioned across all the domains of speaking, reading, writing, listening, and reading. So for example, in speaking, she was developing 2 for linguistic complexity, vocab usage, and language control, and so on down the list. For speaking, our student was asked to produce a story of the 3 little pigs orally. She had difficulty with contractions and distinguishing phonemes, such as the difference of huff and puff. She said, when retelling the story of the 3 little pigs, "Then I huff and your house go down." She frequently mixed up he and she as well, mixing up proper pronouns. In the domain of writing, she used simple and expanded sentences with some detail. When she tries to write more complex sentences, it is hard to understand what she is writing, and communication is lost. In the domain of listening, she has trouble distinguishing phonemes and minimal pairs, such as mentioned above, huff and puff. In the regards to reading, she reads very simple sentences and identifies by pointing out topic-related vocabulary. Based on our students' level of language proficiency, according to Rita, we are in the domain of writing. We would like her to incorporate more graphic organizers into the writing process, which will help her to organize her thoughts. As far as speaking, repetition of speech from the teacher will help her to phonetically articulate words and helps to build confidence in her speaking, as she was at a beginning level 2, so she's working on adding detail and expanding vocabulary. She also, in the area of speaking, needs to expand upon phrases and short sentences, adding, like I said, more detail. In the area of listening, she needs to practice in distinguishing particular phonemes. She was at a beginning level 2 in listening, and if she can distinguish different sounds, it will also make her ability to understand and express her thoughts better. As far as reading, she was at an entering 1, so she really needs the most help and support in this area. So we would like to help her to have an overview of the book or a picture walk prior to reading. She can also discuss with a partner, as in a socio-contextual point of view, she works well with partners and has kind of a scaffolding. She can also access her L1 if she needs to. Based on our case study students' language proficiency levels and Bloom's taxonomy and Costa's questioning, in regards to our lesson, which will be discussed further in a bit, Bloom's taxonomy and Costa's questioning has several different levels, 3 different levels. Level 1 being the basement, which is an intro to knowledge. Level 2 category, the ground floor, which is practicing knowledge learned. And level 3 demonstrates mastery of knowledge learned, which is the penthouse, level 3. So we, based on our case study students' levels of proficiency, we would like her to do the following. Under knowledge and comprehension, she needs to examine, describe, label, and write. Our student overall, like I said, is at a beginner level, so we're looking for her to expand by adding detail and add increasingly complex sentences in writing and speaking. In regards to reading, we added label within the knowledge comprehension category, as our student is at a level 1, and her being able to label and correctly identify words within text is very important. In regards to the application analysis stage, or level 2, we would like our student to discuss and demonstrate. So when she does partner work, she can discuss the book and have scaffolding provided while reading. Also, our student will demonstrate knowledge on topic-specific nouns and adjectives, and also using the present tense verbs of has and so on. The last category in synthesis and evaluation, which is produce, level 3, the penthouse. Our student, we would like her to be able to produce language. So she is going to be producing simple sentences and adding content topic-specific vocabulary and increasingly complex simple sentences through writing.
Our 3 lessons focused on ecology. In lesson 1, students are going to be using nouns and adjectives to describe the physical characteristics of 2 animals. The 2 animals that students are going to be describing in this lesson were a turtle and a duck. We wanted students to be able to describe them in their speaking and in their writing. At the word level, we were again asking that students use topic-specific nouns as well as adjectives to describe their animals. At the sentence level, we were looking for simple sentences with the use of present tense verbs. And at the discourse level, students are going to be matching illustrations from our story in the small pond and finding the pronouns so that they can reference the animals. The instructional resources, again, we used the book in the small pond. There was several ecology posters that students could reference. We used picture cards and realia, as well as vocabulary cards and body part cards. In lesson 2, students will be learning how animals interact in their environment. So students will be using the turtle and the duck that they learned in lesson 1 and describing how it interacts with its environment, which is the park and the pond, in lesson 2. In this lesson, we are asking students to use prepositions and present tense verbs in their speaking and in their writing. At the word level, we are looking for topic-specific nouns again. And then at the sentence level, that's where we're going to be really focusing on the prepositions and being able to see that in their writing. And then at the discourse level, matching their oral language to visuals and writing to explain how animals interact with the pond ecosystem. The story for this lesson is Duck Family by the Pond. Again, we will use the same ecology posters, picture cards. We're adding a graphic organizer in this lesson, which is a 4-corner book, and that will be for vocabulary, so students can keep track of their vocabulary, as well as a song, 5 Little Ducks, and realia from the previous lesson. In lesson 3, students are going to be learning about the effects that littering has on parks and ponds, as well as the animals that live there. To do this, we are listening again to their speaking and they're looking at their writing. Students are going to be using present tense verbs, and in this lesson we're adding imperative verbs. So at the word level, again, we're looking for that topic-specific vocabulary, the use of nouns, adjectives, and imperative verbs. At the sentence level, we want to see that students are able to explain the effects that littering has on park and pond animals by using present tense verbs and writing simple sentences. And then at the discourse level, again, matching oral language to visuals and writing to explain the effects that littering has on park and pond animals. Instructional resources, students will be using the same ecology posters, doing songs, and then using the vocabulary cards let and don't, as well as picture cards and realia from the previous lessons. Our 3 lessons focus on the content area of science and understanding ecology and more about the environment. So lesson 1, we really wanted to build that foundational knowledge of the topic-specific nouns, so just describing animals that lived in the pond and their characteristics, their physical characteristics, in their speaking and their writing. From there, we went to lesson 2, where students are now taking the animals they learned about in the previous lesson and talking about how they interact with their habitat. So how does this turtle and how does this duck interact in their habitat? And in this lesson we added the use of prepositions so that students would be able to use prepositions correctly in their speaking and in their writing, while explaining the effects or the interaction that animals have with their habitat. And then we moved to lesson 3, and in this lesson we were really looking at how littering was affecting those habitats. So now we know that the turtle and the duck live in the pond. How is littering affecting their homes? What role is littering playing in the lives of animals? And so we added the imperative verbs in this lesson so that students can still be working on building sentences, speaking complete sentences, using different grammar and different language, so that we can continue to build on their language, their speaking and writing, but again, addressing those that content knowledge and building upon their content knowledge. In lesson 2, we also assess students' speaking and writing. Students were asked the question, how do animals interact in their environment? For speaking, we used a checklist to record students' understandings and misunderstandings. The teacher listened to each student speak and found 1 star, one thing that they did well, and also 1 wish, a way in which they can improve for next time in their speaking. And then in writing, students were given a picture of an ecosystem that had a duck and a turtle. Students were asked to write sentences describing how the animals interact in their habitat. So their example sentence is the blank lives blank the blank. So an example would be the turtle lives in the pond. We were adding the use of prepositions in this sentence stem, and then again using topic-specific nouns in our sentence. The other part we added is the self-assessment of our objectives. Students would show the number 1 if they knew more about the topic, a number 2 if they knew some things, and a number 3 if they didn't understand. So that was the self-assessment that we added in this lesson. Below are the results from our 3 formative assessments. Lesson 1, writing samples were collected from each student. But we found that our student still struggled with verb conjugations. She did not conjugate the verbs correctly. So instead of writing the duck has webbed feet, she wrote the duck have webbed feet. So she's still confusing singular and plural conjugations, which is an area to improve on for next time. In lesson 2, writing samples were collected again, but we also added the speaking proficiency to help assess with their speaking. So students received a number score based on their proficiency. So if students were not able to say a sentence at all, they received a 0. A 1 for a repeated sentence from which the teacher had said first, and then a 2 with some scaffolding in order to say their sentence, and 3 is students who didn't need any help. So our student wrote a sentence but forgot to include her preposition. So she wrote the duck swims pond instead of the duck swims in the pond. And so she can write a complete thought but is still having some difficulty with the preposition. And then in lesson 3, we assess students speaking and writing again in the use of topic-specific vocabulary. In this lesson, our student was able to write a complete sentence. She wrote, "Don't litter." And the only hope is that next time students will write, our student will write a longer sentence and give more detail to the reader in order to explain the effects of littering. And so these are the results from our 3 formative assessments.
As far as the strength of assessment and instruction, overall, it was scaffolded well to level 1 and 2, and we provided a lot of socio-contextual influences, so students had the opportunity to work in pairs and groups and also individually. And then they also had several choices, and our student had several choices of either labeling or writing sentences. So it was really supported in a lot of different levels. And there were also a lot of visuals, and the assessment was related directly to the objective, as the writing could be assessed quickly. And finally, the lesson was interactive, engaging, and the students had fun. Overall, it was a successful lesson and assessment, and truly reflected what our learner was able to do, and she progressed. Based on our data collected, I would like to reflect upon the learner's outcomes and how we could better adapt the lesson. In general, we could have been more specific about grammar points and also sentence frames, and really provided more guidance on how they could add detail and broken it down a little bit more specifically. One example would be we could have done singular versus plural and have the students use more sentence frames about ducks specifically. As far as assessment, having students speak the different sentences about ducks as well, so they had a little bit more oral practice. This would accomplish the objective in speaking and in writing as well. We could have had a little bit more modeling on how to write different sentences with different prepositions we learned during the lessons, so different prepositions to describe different areas in the park, and maybe just given some examples and maybe done like a little mini lesson on prepositions on the side. Having pictures that better represented the prepositions, like I just said, an anchor chart, which was used with the lesson and works really well with vocabulary, so if we kind of match that with prepositions, that could work well. She could have created an extension activity for students who finished their writing quickly, so just having a little, like I said, mini lesson, a little extra step to kind of develop that next sequential grammar point. Having more sentence frames with, which are more specific, so students can extend their sentences by adding more details. I kind of already mentioned that, so just having a little bit more structure and guidance there. Adding alphabet cards next to vocabulary words so they can recognize the beginning sound of the word more easily. So, for example, having a picture of a letter sound they might know in English could make it less difficult. Team reflection, assessment, and advocacy. Throughout our case study, our team learned and applied first, the concept of direct cognitive strategies, and this helped our students' enhancement of cognitive functions by the use of specific psychological tools. And that's from Diaz-Rico, page 111. So we focused on schema building, so providing context, building context and background for the student. 2, scaffolding, so providing multi-group practice, and students could partner up, they could work individually, so really this kind of catered to every type of learner. Graphic organizers, like the 4 corners vocabulary, for example, and as well as critical and creative thinking. One cool thing that students might do at the end of the lesson, I was thinking as far as creative thinking, was to sketch maybe an animal, and then you could kind of could learn about shapes quickly and kind of go over as they draw the different parts. They could kind of label and again get more language vocab practice. Just a side note there. The second point here is learner autonomy, that allows learners to feel pride in their own achievements by self-motivation and self-management. And again, that's from Diaz-Rico, page 101. Number 1, we learned and applied freedom of choice and activity, so that was lesson 1. 2, goal setting, lesson 2, so they have that grammar and content they are focused on and they realize the objective of the lesson. 3, self-efficacy and self-efficiency, belief in themselves, and they're agents of their own success, so they're having fun and learning while doing it. So this would lesson 3 in particular.